All right, guys, welcome to this mini tutorial. This is kind of something I'm throwing together only because it was asked for a Facebook member or inside of a Facebook group where I posted this comp. Now, just a little bit of background about this comp. This actually appeared in my feed from another YouTuber, and it was a Adobe Illustrator tutorial. So I thought after seeing it, I didn't actually watch the tutorial all the way through, but I thought after seeing the finished concept that how much of this could I pull into the text tool? How much of this could I make just from a single text node? And then it got a little crazy and I added a little more extra styling to it, but I'm kind of going to walk through this and show you how much flexibility you have with the text tool. I'm also going to go over some of the background concepts, some of the things that you may or may not know to kind of help push you along inside learning about how to use some of the nodes and tools inside Fusion, or at least understanding them a little bit better. All right, so we'll jump inside the comp here, and then let's zoom in. Let's get this in the view. Now let's get a couple of workflow things out of the way, or things that might trip you up when you first open up this comp, which I will make available for download. There's two things that you're going to definitely need just to get started, and one of them is the Rific font. That is a free download on the font. I will either include the font itself, or I will probably include the URL to the font. The other one is Unisans. Now Unisans is needed for the README I include inside of the comp itself. And the way Fusion works is that if you do not have the if you do not have the font, the comp will not render and it will not give you an error. So if you want, I'll include that there so that you'll be able to you'll be able to install it before you open up the comp. Or if you do get an error, just go ahead and install it and it should work out fine. If you don't want to do that, if you want to tinker with some of the parameters, you can double-click, open up that README file, click on the text README here, and go and just change the font itself until something that's on your system is readable. The next thing you might run into is the way the comp looks. So if you right click in the open area, you'll see that I actually have these three options turned on to basically force the source and tile pictures of the node pictures that you see before you. So if you want to go ahead and match what I'm doing right here, you can force all tile pictures, show mode options, and then show thumbnails. And then optional, you can go into arrange tools and put to connected and auto arrange. I also have show instance lines turned on. So basically, if you've never seen the instance lines, it's the faintly green lines that connect the nodes. I usually turn them off because they get in the way. The last thing I will talk about is, and it's in the README, is that I am using a couple of fuses from REACTOR. If you don't know what REACTOR is a package manager for plugins for Fusion and Resolve. It usually has to be installed via a Lua script. If you want, I can make a tutorial on that. If you guys make a comment on below, I'll show you how that is done. But I do have a couple of fuses here that I'm using called wireless links, and they're all in here. And then I have a bonus that I'll kind of show you off that is using a fuse from REACTOR as well. Okay, so now that we got all of that out the way, let's get started. All right, so what we're going to do is go step by step through all of these nodes just to see how it's put together, to kind of give you a feel. This is not going to be a comprehensive lay down each node tutorial, but it should give you a sense with the comp in your hand how this was put together. It's fairly simple and easy to do. The other thing you might want to keep in mind is that this was a quick or something I put together really quickly. So I think I spent 15 minutes on it, maybe 20, actually going ahead, putting this comp together. So there are probably errors or things that can be fixed. I would say this file is not 100% production ready, but it is tutorial ready. All right, so let's start with the stage. Now I create these first. It's the first thing I do because they define my output resolution. If you're not aware that Fusion is resolution independent, meaning you could up-res, down-res, put mixed media inside that Fusion comp and render it all out. Or if you've ever worked with After Effects, you've seen where certain comps are stuck at a certain size because of the initial defined comp size, whether it be 4K. Usually a lot of people do it at 1080. The great thing about Fusion is that it's not locked to those same limitations. The bad thing is that there is a quirk to Fusion that everything is, I would say, background based. So your background really drives a lot of your parameters, especially transform and scale and even keyframing from point to point. So it's something you should keep in mind. So usually what I'll do is I'll start with a nice big stage. Again, this will define my output. And if we just step through this really quickly, you'll see that I've added a little texture. This is a grain node. If I turn up the power, you'll see it more. And then we have a merge node here. And then you'll see here, I just have a simple node that is connected to the background. And then what I'm doing here inside the merge tool is wrapping on the edge. So you'll get these here. So if I move this, you see that it wraps around. Now this is very similar to mirror tile inside After Effects. We have another text tool here, or text node, and this just defines the header at the bottom there. And I'm using the merge node to actually position it. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that I usually define my backgrounds. In this case, the text node creates its own background. You can go into, you'll see here, text, layout, transform, and then you can go into image. And you can see I'm defining the size here. Most of the time, if you were to create just, that's the transform tool, we don't want that. If you were to create a text tool and bring it in, you'll notice that it comes in at the comp resolution you define. Now, if you don't know how to define an overarching comp resolution, if you double click down here on the RAM input, you will find that you can open this up and go into frame format, and you can set this. Now you can see that all of my comps as I enter in is set at 4K 60 frames a second. So when I open up a brand new comp, or if we jump out real quick, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but if I go to effects and I drag a fusion composition onto the timeline, it will start at the UHD, or the 4K 60 frames a second. So something to keep in mind, little tip here and there. But what I've done here, if we go back to bring that up, you'll see I'll define my own resolution 600 by 77. I've made sure that I've kept this centered inside this background instead of moving it around here. And then when I merge, you can do it two ways. You can use the transform node in between that, or you can use the merge tools movement, which is, yes, right here. And you'll see that's relative to the background there. So we'll move on pretty quickly. And then here, the last of this, I have just my color bar. Now there's a couple of ways that you can bring this in. I went ahead and actually built this in their instances. So if I go up here, you'll see that I have a color block, 60 by 60. And then it's just a simple polygon shape, a rectangle tool, and then a background. But what I've done is I've grouped these, and then on this, I've created custom controls for myself so that I can change the color. So if we leave that white, and then we go down here to colors, you'll see that I've defined a stage for the colors. And again, this is just for sizing purposes and transform purposes inside. And then each one of these are instances. So I can go on top of this block here, and with my custom, whoops, there we go. Custom controls, I can change the color of these built right into the group. So if you guys want an extensive tutorial on how to do that, then let me know in the comments below as well. All right, so now let's get to what you guys came here for. So we'll start again with the same thing. We've built a background for ourselves. Now in this case, I knew that I wasn't really going to animate it, but I knew I didn't want it to be full size. So I created a background. And again, this is just a standard background tool. You can hit X. Whoops, let's not do that. If you click on the open space, you hit X, you'll get the background itself. That's a shortcut. And all I did with that was I changed it to black, and then I lowered the opacity. Now, the thing about backgrounds, if you're not familiar with them, is that if you have any kind of color in there, since I think it's affecting the alpha, you will not get a full transparency because there's red. You're adding red to that alpha channel. You need to pull all of that out. So you got to make it completely black to go into a transparent, or have no alpha channel there, or a transparent alpha channel, I should say. All right, so we'll move on. Now, here's a special one. This is a wireless node. Now, I believe, somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, that by default, Fusion and Resolve have the wireless node installed by the at installation time. It's a default node, but I could be wrong. This one you see here is actually a fuse, like I said, that comes from REACTOR itself. And what it does is it allows me to have a node inside of my comp that might need to be changeable. So if you've worked with motion, or if you've worked with motion, Apple Motion, or if you've worked with After Effects, these are similar to drop zones where you'll be able to say, like you made a photo comp and you have 50 photos, you allowed the user to change out, but you didn't want them to touch the actual composition of the nodes or mess with them. You can put in in Motion is called a drop zone. In Apple Motion, I forgot what it's called in After Effects. It could just be a file drop. But with the wireless node, the actual content is here. So this is the actual node here, even though it looks like it's there. So let me show you how this works, because I'm kind of babbling about this. So if we go to the wireless node and I turn on this cartoon, let's look at this. Where's it at? Up. These nodes are actually disabled. If you want to re-enable them, Control P will let you enable them. So now let's look at that. Yep. Here we go. So you'll see this says creative background. Now I want to be able to add this right here to this where it says cartoon style, my main comp. So all I have to do is select the wireless node, select the wireless node and click drag onto the cartoon into this input right here where it says cartoon style. And what happens is it's switched. You see that it's switched the comp, or it's actually now attaching this like an alias to this without me touching the comp or anything over here in the workings. So I have less chance of breaking the setup by just doing that. So let's drag this back into there. And you'll see down here, I have another wireless effect where I have the effects mask, and I'll go over that in a minute. These effects where I'm doing the same thing, where I've dragged them in and I've been able to change the look and feel without breaking the entire comp. All right, so let's get into the text tool, the meat and potatoes here. So that's that first node here. And what we're doing is, let's start this off. I can't bring this out too much, but if you look over here, what we did is we went ahead and we put cartoon style into the text box. And then once we did that, we right clicked on there and I've made this character level styling. So character level styling lets us design or basically add a style to each letter or a set of words and things like that. It basically lets us have a different style set up for each letter inside our space, anything we want to do inside that style in the text block. So knowing that, what I did first was I looked at the overall general. So the first thing that we have is the shading. Let's go up to number 1. And if you're not familiar with the shading panel, it basically allows you to add Photoshop-like layers to your text tool. So if we go here, let's split this, make this easier, and let's just copy this. So let's bring up a text tool. Let me get this out of here. Let's bring this up. And we'll throw it on the monitor. If you guys watched any other Fusion tutorials, one of the things that a lot of people do is they take tools, they throw them into the windows to view them into the viewers. I am firmly against that. I just do not like doing it. You can activate the viewers 1, 2, and then if you have a third monitor, you can use 3. Or in my case, like you see down here is 1, 2, 3. Also, if you have a VR headset connected, you'll see a 4th dot. But with that said, what I want to do is hit 2 to bring this up here and hit 1 to bring this up here. I actually turned that off, so let's not do that. The first thing I'm going to do is that's already matched at 3840 by 2160. That's UHD 4K. Let's keep that there. Let's paste in the cartoon style. So now let's start styling this exactly like this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go down here to the horizontal anchor and I actually kept this centered. We are going to right click and click character level styling. Now, if you notice that this right here is actually larger than this. So the first thing we'll do before we get started is we'll set Rific, wherever it may be, as our Rific free. There we go. So now we got that. And let's just bring up the vertical, sorry, not the vertical anchor. Do not want that. Where is it at? I actually want to line spacing. So we're gonna use the line spacing to bring it closer together. That looks about right. We'll keep it there. The next thing we want to do is we want to jump into our shading tab. Now our shading tab again is used for Photoshop-like layers that we're going to lay down. So our first layer is obviously going to be our text itself, the white text. The next layer down, I think we're pretty happy with the way this looks, but the one thing we want to change is to make this larger like this. Basically, it should fill corner to corner of cartoon. So what you can do, if you right clicked and use style, character level styling like it said, you can highlight this and you will see these green tick marks. And this means that your character can now be modified, and just these specifically. So once you added that character level styling modifier, you notice this lit up, this modifiers panel, and now we have direct control over this, where we can add our own, we can change the text, we can transform it all on its own. Let's go to transform so you can just see that in actions. I can change the spacing. I can do it by word, which is not going to move, and then I can do it by lines. Let's keep it on characters for now, and then we're going to go into the shading tab. And on that first shading tab, what we want to do is actually, we're not going to do the size on the shading tab because it's size X, Y, and Z, and that's a scale. We'll just do it on the main tab here. And we'll just size that up until about there. So that looks good. So now that we finished with just these characters, we're going to click in an empty space, double click, and that will get rid of that. And we'll be back on tools. So the one thing you got to remember is that you have to have the text selected and make sure that you're on the right tab. If you're on the modifiers tab, you might be editing some of your style text or selected text, or if you're on the tools tab, in this case, you're going to be modifying the text as a whole. So let's double click, make sure that nothing is selected, and we'll make sure that we're in our tools panel. And we're going to jump back over to the shading tab. So now let's add our second layer. Now our second layer, we're going to turn on. Let's name this. Actually, let's go back. I'm big on naming. So we'll call this just name text. Next thing we're going to do is we'll call this outline, right? And this will be this right here, this nice little outline right there. So you can see that it's already showing up in the red as I turned it on. But we're going to expand it just a little bit. First, let's grab that color. And again, with my color blocks turned on, I would usually just grab it from there. But since we have this here, I can just grab the color picker, select that. We're good. Let's turn on, we want the joint style right here, these to be sharp instead of rounded. And we're just going to increase the thickness until we get something we like. And that's good right there. So that's looking good. Next thing we're going to do is we can probably go a little bit more on the thickness. Now you'll see here that I've dragged it. It's been dragging. Wow. I'm at the end of that scale here, but the thing is you can overdrive these. So if I go ahead and put in 1, this will basically reset it from 0 now to 1 instead of what the original scale was. And so now we can just go down just a little bit. We just want to bring this up so it covers most of the letters. It will help for us to do less work. Now that that's set, let's add the secondary glow. We're just going to do the same thing, the secondary outline. we'll just say outline, whoops, can't type, outline pink. So now that we have that, we'll go to appearance. We'll set that appearance as outline. We'll select this pink color here. You can use the color blocks or any color you want. Now you'll notice that right here that even though it showed up, it's kind of this soft glow behind it. And it's because each selected element or shading element has its own preset that is supposed to be a fast preset for you to go in and change. Like this one is shadows, the other one was outline. And as you go down the line, they all have their own presets. So we're gonna have to go in and reset some of these parameters. So for the softness, on the third one, we're gonna hit 0, 0, soften that up. We're also gonna have to go down and change the position back to 0. We want this to just be centered. So now that that's good to go, we can go ahead and create our third outline. Let's drive up the thickness. Let's just go ahead and put 2 in here. And that's gonna be really large. And we'll just bring it back down until something we're happy with. We'll go ahead and hit this. Now you're gonna notice some font errors here and here. This has to do with the font and not Fusion itself. It's actually the point here coming up through that, and also this endpoint poking through there. That's what's going on. We'll cover those up after. Let's just drag it down. And I think right there, that looks pretty good, pretty similar, and almost close to what we want. There's a couple of options we need to turn on. So let's go back to number 2. And what we're gonna do is put outside only and adapt to perspective. And we'll probably drag our thickness just down just a little bit, probably to right about there. I'm liking that. And then let's go to 3 again, and the same thing, adapt into outline. You see that kind of blend up because now we're going on the outside. We're just gonna drag it down until we get, that looks good. We're doing good there. So that looks pretty close, but what you may be wondering is how do we fill in these areas here? Now the first thought might be to grab a masking tool or another background and just merge that somewhere down the line outside of the tool, but you can actually do this inside of Fusion itself. So, and you can actually do it, not Fusion itself, but the text tool itself. So what we're gonna do is I'm gonna start backwards here. Before I do that, let me talk about priorities real quick. So our sort by, I should say, you can sort by priority or Z depth. So priority is a number that is set here inside the position. And what you can do with this is that if we go to number 1, you'll see that it's set at actually 8. If we go to number 2, it's at 7. And it's the same thing as it goes all the way down. Obviously 8 is higher than 7. So the first layer will always be on top, second layer will be under it, third layer, et cetera, et cetera. So there's some cool things you can do with that knowledge. One of them might be if we go to the 4th style element and we turn that on, we see we got this blue box. What's cool is if, say, I wanted to mask out part of this image, or let's just mask this whole thing out within the text tool. What I can do is set this to, say, 7. I believe that's where let's do our pink outline. So that's on the 6th layer. And you'll see that even though it looks like it's sitting on top, it's actually in line with it. So 6 here, and then, whoops, there we go. We'll see that it's 6 here. Now that we have that set, let's go ahead and just take this all the way down to black, and we'll take the alpha, and that'll basically knock out the text. So you see here, we've just basically masked off the text using a styling element inside. Now, knowing that, we can do cool fill-in of our layers, right? Because we know that we could not only mask out, but we can match color and fill stuff in. So if we're using the 4th layer, what we'll do is we'll select this color. We'll make sure that the appearance is on block. Let's go ahead and turn off, so you can see this better. We'll turn off the 2nd element, turn off the 3rd element. And what we're gonna do now is go into that 4th element. we'll keep the composition the same. We'll keep the opacity the same. We'll have it at line level. We can do line or word, either one works. And what we're gonna do is drag the extend horizontal probably in a little bit. We want to cover that O. So again, when we've run into the end of that bar, so we need to overdrive it again, so we can put -1 in there, which will overdrive it even more. So we'll bring it down, and then the next thing we need to do is move it over. So down here in the position, we can offset it on the X. And just, you have to play with it a little bit. Now the pivot point is in the center here, so it extends out from both sides on the center, and it will move from this area. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this. And we'll just fill that up. So that looks good, and we'll change the vertical down. So this fills that in. Now the problem you're gonna see is that this one here doesn't exactly cover up our D where we need it to. It also doesn't cover up down here inside of our Y and L to kind of mask this part out, and we'll lose this hole if we keep it here. So how do we fix that? Well, the great thing is that the character level styling actually works for these as well. So we can take this and just select all of these. And then what we'll do is jump into the modifiers, and we're gonna jump to shading level 4. I can't talk, and you'll see that it matches up. But the great thing is now we have specific control over just this element. So now I can move this by itself, independent of that top one. So we'll move this into place, and let's shorten it up just a little bit. And move that there. Let's also bring up the vertical on it. And I think I'm gonna round it just a little bit to kind of, now I rounded it so that it won't poke out here and it won't poke out up here, but we might need to adjust it a little bit more. Let's go ahead and double click so we deselect that, switch back over the tools. Let's go back to our shading graph and turn on shading graph. Sorry, been working in Unity recently a lot. Let's turn on our shading elements, and we'll see that we can't see anything. And this again goes to priority. So let's go back to 4, and we're going to put it at level 7 because it's sitting at the same. So there, now we're above. So we see we still need to do a couple of adjustments to get this right. So let's select the top cartoon and adjust that in the modifier itself. So I don't need any horizontal, but I definitely need some vertical here. And let's just pull it down a little bit. Whoops, that's a little bit too much. There we go. And we're just gonna move it over a tad. So that one looks still not right. It's not perfect. Let's extend it a little more. And it's just something you have to play with to figure out what you want. That's kind of, that's good enough. It's very close. Let's try to match these in here, keep that C together, but we'll leave it at that. And the same thing, we'll go down here to the bottom, make sure you select this, and we'll do the same thing. We're gonna extend the vertical just a little bit, extend the horizontal just a little bit as well, not too much, and we'll bring it down. You got to be careful with Fusion, and it's very slippery, I'll call it, and with how it does things. And we have this little pit sticking out, so let's just adjust it a little bit more. Too much. There we go with that slipperiness. And there we go. So that fits. We've pretty much done all of that in that single text tool just by using the shading elements. Let me call them by what they are. Now, there's some things to keep in mind when working with character level styling and how Fusion works and the little hiccups and things like that is that one of the things is this selection is different from this selection. The way, well, that's definitely different, but if you just select this part of it, that's a different selection outside of that full selection. Some people may forget, or they may have like these 3 letters selected because that's where that mask is, the pseudo mask that we're creating, but that's not the same selection and you won't be editing the same set of letters. So just keep that in mind when you're doing this, to be careful that make sure that you reselect the same letters that you selected when you originally edited the mask or the element or anything from the beginning. Okay, so let's click off of that. Now that that looks the same, let's look at how we handled cleaning up some of the text. Now, we could go in here and do this with the shading elements as well, like I showed you before, where I'll go and I can mask this out at the top level. And that's pretty easy to do given just what I showed you. You go ahead, you would take a black shading element, you would move it into place, and then you could make this disappear. I found that to be more trouble than it's worth, only because there might be other fonts or other letters. Like if I changed it to this, where it's in different places, especially with the A, that you may need to move the mask. And I just found it easier to control the mask outside of this. So this is as far as we can go with the text tool. We can actually take it further. Don't get me wrong. We can actually pretty much do everything, including the 3D effect inside the text tool, but it would take more work than we're actually want to put in. It's just not something you want to go through and keep the file light, or at least keep your sanity when having to edit this. All right, so let's take this back to a single window. Let's go back to the next node. So as we get into here, we'll see this branches off, and this is how we're going to create this look, which is the bottom area for the shading and the 3D effect. Now there are multiple ways to do a long shadow, tons of ways. This is just the way I've done it for this project. I probably wouldn't do it in the future, but this works. So take it for what you will. So if we look at this, what I've done, let's actually turn off this mask, is I've plugged this into, this is a, what is this here? This is a directional blur. So if we look at how a directional blur normally works, let's plug this in and plug this into this one. Let's back up for a minute. I might have made a mistake here. So the directional blur might not be an included tool. I think it might be one, or I might have just grabbed the wrong one. It might have been before Fusion. I've been working with Fusion since Fusion, I think 8. Yeah, Fusion 8. So it might be old code stuck around. So let's look at this directional blur. It's set to linear. So let's look at what I have here. Now we want to actually set it to zoom. So we'll go in here, set this to zoom, and then we'll change the length as I have done. And you'll see it creates this, obviously it's a zooming effect to a parallel point in the distance, right? So we can also change the center. It seems to not be, wrong one. Sorry guys, it's been a while since I've been doing a tutorial, but here you go. Now, if you look that I've brought that center all the way down, the text is kind of going back. It's coming into parallel this way to one single point. So it's zooming into this point here. If you've ever done perspective drawing, I've been through those classes like I have, you'll see where it's merging into, and we can change that point to wherever we want. But we have it down here, and if you can see it, you see the 3D effect that we're already getting from this. Now we want to turn this into a solid piece that we can work with. So the first thing I did, the easiest thing and not the only way, is to grab a background tool and plug it right into the mask. And what you get is a blacked out version. Now the problem is, you see here, we got a solid color going well, is that we have the little gradient here, which will not give us a solid effect. We want something that's solid, similar to what we see here, right? So what you can do is you can take this glow and we're just going to crank it all the way up, but we're going to overdrive this. Just put in whatever number you want. 20 is good. We basically want to push the white all the way out to the edge. Now, again, there are tons of other ways to do this. You can plug it into a channel boolean, and you can plug it into some other color tools, things like that, to get the same effect. But you also would have to add perspective into the zooming, into the God, what do I want to call this? The point. Basically, the only way you can add perspective without adding a 3D camera is to use what's called the DVE node. It's a node, if you type DVE, this is a perspective node where you could use this to skew and change a flat 2D image into perspective. I wouldn't say it's a lot of work, but again, for a fast effect, this was quicker for me to do. I pretty much get it for free with the directional blur. I just need to do some tricks to make sure that I get a solid outline like I got here. Now you can see it's still a little bit soft, but that adds to the effect because it's going off in the distance and it softens up. So sharper at the beginning or the foreground, it's a little bit fuzzy, almost like a depth of field effect as you go towards the back, right? So if we change that color into one of the color blocks, or what we start to get, so let me back up. You saw what I did here, plugged in directional blur. I increased the length a little bit, and I pumped up the glow as much as we can to get rid of the softened edges, and then plug that into a background, the mask in the background. And that's what we did here. And then what happens is I got that solid color. Now this mask is because I only want to work with the top part of the text, or the bottom part of the text. So we're masking out that top part. So if you look at it, I went ahead and masked that out. And then as we go down here, you'll see as it splits, that's what we get. All right. So hopefully that makes sense. We have the text that we created earlier. We create our long shadow by having a blur node. We're going off into the blur node, branching off here. We're masking part of that out. So the mask, the white, is revealing what we want to see, which is that bottom part here. We're plugging it into a background node to get a solid color. We have a separate one. So we have two different colors. One is going to be for the highlights, and one is for the material itself. And we're merging that together. Now, if I go down here, you'll see that I'm revealing parts of the highlight, this foreground to this background. This is just a standard merge node. And here we have another wireless effect that's connected to wireless link, not effect. I named it wireless effect. And these are just polygon tools where I'm cutting out, this is the wrong one, this one here, where I'm actually cutting out pieces of the highlight, or pieces of the background, or foreground, excuse me, to wow, go get some coffee, guys, even late at night. I'm cutting out the foreground to reveal the highlights beneath, right? That's plugged into the mask here, and then we merge back into this. So this background into this foreground. So text tool on top, and then you have this monstrosity, we'll say here, which is the background, the top masked out. We have the background material, then we have the highlights cut out with mask. If I move the mask around, if you see these, wrong ones, I keep doing that. If I move these masks around, let's just select these. I can change where things are highlighted, where I want the light. So this is a pseudo 3D effect. It's very flexible in its way, and I'll show you a real 3D effect with this bonus. Once we do on that, all we do is merge them together, and we have our cartoon styles, right? So we have a pseudo 3D effect. We go down here, we sized it down. We move on and we merge it into the stage. That's pretty much it. I know that was long-winded kind of way to get through this, but I wanted to show some other stuff, some other thinking that I had and what went into these when I do these quick little sketches, to kind of give you an idea of where my workflow is versus some other people who go step by step from left to right. Just not something I do. And it's helped me create things that I see out in the wild. Even it doesn't matter if it was created in Illustrator or if it was created in After Effects or any other motion graphics program. I usually can put it together in Fusion just by this workflow. There's other things that I use in my workflow, but normally any motion graphics project, I can easily convert over into Fusion by using these tips and tricks, just what I showed you outside of the text tool. So it's all there. It's just a different way of thinking. So now that we did the effect in 2D, let's see how we can do it in true 3D. For this, we're going to need a plugin. And the only way to get that is if you have REACTOR installed. And if you do have REACTOR installed, you can go to Scripts, REACTOR, and then you're going to go to Open REACTOR. Give it a second to open. What you're going to search for, if it opens, is the KROKODOVE toolset for Fusion. You want to have this installed, and this has a great set of tools for you to use, and one of those you can use is called Extrude. So let's take a look at this, and you see here we have 3 nodes. If you didn't have the wireless node in, if you have REACTOR, you probably have the wireless node. Make sure you download it, but if you didn't, this would just be the text node put in here. And then you'll see that we have this 3D node down here, this extrude node. And if I go into the extrude node, let's save it just in case Fusion decides to be nasty and crash on us. We could change the perspective to either parallel or radial, and then we can change the length of this. Now, if you go too far, what's happening here is that it's actually bumping into the radius of the canvas. And that's, again, this goes back to backgrounds controlling a lot of tools, parameters, and Fusion. So we're actually running into the domain of that background of the Fusion tool or the text tool. So that's why this is getting cut off. But we can do cool things like changing the direction or the lighting in this case. So it's something to play with, and you can see how you can quickly get 3D effects with a simple tool. Again, it doesn't, if we were doing this for a client, it actually wouldn't fit the style because of the way the material looks and the color. So we wouldn't use that. This is more, gives a more cartoon vibe to it, more illustrated vibe, as opposed to this one, that 3D look. But if you are looking for something quick and 3D like, that's the way to go. All right, so I hope this is helpful. I don't normally do tutorials on a regular basis. It's not my forte. It is not my craft. It is not my, I should say, passion. But if you guys do want more of these and some more quick sketches I'll be putting out, I will do my best to get them out. But for now, you know, the only way to let me know if you want more of these is to click that subscribe button. I hate saying it. I hate when YouTubers saying it, but it will give me feedback to let me know what you guys want to see. And next time I will try to up my game on the tutorial front so they're a little more polished if I get a little more interest. That way I can dedicate time to this type of stuff. So leave me a comment, let me know below, subscribe, hit the notification bell, all of that good stuff. And I will try to put out more of these quick sketches for you guys to look at. And if you have something you want me to convert or explain, pull into Fusion, pick apart, even if it's from After Effects or anywhere else you've seen, shoot it over to me. I'll do a quick sketch and then we'll do a breakdown just like this. All right, thanks for watching this long, error-ridden, buggy, spitting video, whatever you want to call it. I appreciate it. Thanks. See you next time.